Hello everybody, this is David. Welcome back to my channel. Well, this is the next video in our series that we're doing, the Christian ethic in the 21st century. And I want to begin in this video to look at, for want of a better word, a new system of ethics. For the last 16 videos, we've been looking at the system of ethics that Western culture is built upon, which we know as the Judeo-Christian ethic. We looked at the Jewish ethics in the first 4 videos, then we looked at the teachings of Jesus in the next 4 videos, then we looked at the Christian ethic in the teachings of the Apostle Paul in 8 videos as well. Now, it is safe to say that the Judeo-Christian ethic are very hard to beat, very hard to improve upon, and that they have served humanity very well for the last 2,000 years. They've built civilizations and cultures better than any system of ethics in history. Now, in this video, I want to begin to look at a system of ethics that came out in the 1960s. It's true to say that the 1960s were a decade of tremendous change and upheaval all over the world. I'm talking about morally and ethically in terms of human behaviour. Now, what is it, I hear you asking? Well, the system of ethics that is trying to overthrow the basis of our culture is called situation ethics. Now, before I say any more about this, let me just say that when we talk about ethics, we generally mean a set of rules, laws or principles by which we can act and which tells us what to do in any situation that we find ourselves in. Now, we understand that ethics classes each situation as either good or bad, and we understand that the goodness or badness is in the situation itself. Now, in each situation, ethics are meant to simplify things and make life easy. It means that we have a prefabricated set of rules, as it were, laws and principles which we accept and apply in our lives. Now, these rules, laws and principles save us from the difficult and potentially dangerous task of making our own judgments and deciding things for ourselves. Now, the Judeo-Christian ethic is exactly this type of ethic. It's been a safeguard for, well, let's say the world actually, but certainly Western culture. It's been a safeguard for the last 2,000 years. Now, situation ethics was proposed in 1966 by Robert Fletcher, who was, Joseph Fletcher, who was an Episcopal priest. Oh, that's a very hard word to say. In America. He wrote 2 books, Situation Ethics and The Classic Treatment, and they became very influential, as you might expect, in that era of history. He argued that sometimes moral principles can be cast aside, put away, done away with in certain situations if what his idea of love, agape, love, is best served for, in his mind, in Christianity, love is the ultimate law. Now, Fletcher believed that establishing an ethical system based on love was the best way to express the Christian principle to love thy neighbour as taught in the Bible. He believed that there are no absolute laws other than the law of agape love, and all the other laws were secondary and inferior by agape in order to achieve the greatest amount of this love. So yeah, very, very, very much a 1960s way of thinking. And one of the other things that came out of this is, in the case of situational ethics, the ends can justify the means. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at, before I do have an opinion on this, and I do have a view, and there is a lot that we can say about this, but what I wanted to do first is look at what the principles of situational ethics are, because they've really messed up society, I would say, and ethics after that, systems of ethics after that, are basically do what you want. If it feels good, why not? So let's have a look at the principles of situation ethics. So situational ethics relies on one principle, and that principle is what best serves love. Now, according to Fletcher, Christian love is unconditional and unsentimental. Situational ethics is based on the golden rule in his view, love your neighbour as yourself, and altruism, which is putting others before yourself and showing agape love towards everyone. It agrees on reason being the instrument of moral judgments, but disagrees that the good is to be disconcerned from the nature of things. In other words, all moral decisions depend on what the most loving thing to do is. Now, he felt compelled to outline his theory in 10 principles, which he split into 4 working presuppositions and 6 fundamental principles, which I want to have a look at now. So the 4 working presuppositions are, firstly, pragmatism. That is, that the course of action must be practical and it must work. Then there's relativism, in that all situations are always relative. Situational ethicists try to avoid such words as never and always. Then there's positivism. The whole of situational ethics relies on the fact that the person freely chooses to believe in agape love as described by Christianity. Then there is personalism, which the legalist thinks people, it's the comparison between the legalist who thinks people should work to laws or operate according to laws, and the situational ethicist who believes that the laws are for the benefit of the people. So there's 6 fundamental principles. Firstly, there's the first proposition, and we're getting all this from his books, by the way. The first proposition is that only one thing is intrinsically good, namely love. Nothing else at all, just love. The second proposition is the ruling norm of Christian decision is love, nothing else. The third proposition is that love and justice are the same. For justice is love distributed, nothing else. Now, justice is Christian love using its head, calculating its duties, its obligations, its opportunities, its resources. Justice is love coping with situations where distribution is called for. So the fourth proposition is that love wills the neighbour's good, whether we like him or not. The fifth proposition is only the end justifies the means, nothing else. And the sixth proposition is love's decisions are made situationally, not prescriptively. So, what's all this got to do with the Bible and Christianity? Well, as a priest, Joseph Fletcher claimed Christian ethics to be a true set of Christian morals that tie in with biblical teaching. But it has to be said, not all people agree with him on this. So we're going to now look at some scriptures that have been used to both support and challenge whether situational ethics is compatible with the Bible. So let's have a look at Jesus in relation to the law and the prophets, where he says in Matthew chapter 5 verse 17 to 19, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven, but whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in heaven." Then there's the greatest commandment, as we read in Matthew 22 verse 35 to 40, where we read, "One of the Pharisees, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' Jesus replied, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbour as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments.' One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating." So we're in Mark chapter 12 now, 28 to 34. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these.'" "Well said, teacher," the man replied. "You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding and with all your strength, and to love your neighbour as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." So then there's the scripture which talks about the Lord of the Sabbath, which we read in Mark chapter 2 verse 27. "Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.'" Then Jesus was at a Pharisee's home in Luke chapter 14 verses 1 to 6, where we read, "One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Peter asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?' But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, 'If any one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out?' And they had nothing to say." So then there's Paul talking about the relationship between love and the law, as we read in Romans chapter 13 verses 8 to 10. "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law. The commandments: 'Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and whatever other commandment then there may be are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbour as yourself. Love does no harm to its neighbour. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So, Paul talks about freedom that we have in grace, as we saw read in Galatians chapter 5 verses 6 to 14. For in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. The entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbour as yourself. Well, very interesting, don't you think? So let's look how we can answer this. Now, upon writing the book Situation Ethics, Fletcher claimed that, like its predecessor, utilitarianism, the theory was a simple and practical one, hinging around one single principle of utility, which is agape love. Now, however, he then goes on to attempt to define agape love, and in the process creates more and more principles. So some would claim this makes situational ethics more complicated and less practical than the original utilitarianism. Now, John Robinson, who was the Anglican Bishop of Woolwich and Trinity College, he started off as a firm supporter of situational ethics, referring to the responsibility it gave to the individual in deciding the morality of their actions. However, he later withdrew his support for the theory, recognizing that people could not take this sort of responsibility, remarking that, and I quote, "it will all descend into moral chaos," end of quote. Some people say that situational ethics give people more freedom to make their own decisions, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. But if you look into it, it has just the same amount of freedom as the next ethical theory. It says that you should take the most loving course of action, showing you the one option you should choose from the many available, which is just the same as many other ethical theories. So situational ethics is individualistic and therefore may give people an excuse for not obeying the rules when it suits them. Typical 1960s thinking. For example, if someone wants to do something badly enough, they are likely to be able to justify it to themselves. Agape love is an ideal, whereas some have argued that humanity is a practical species full of selfishness and other flaws. Situational ethics is subjective because decisions are made by the individual from within the perceived situation, thus calling into question the reliability of that choice. Now, this theory is what we call a teleological or consequential theory. And one of the problems with this type of theory is that they are based on future consequences, and the future is quite hard to predict in some cases. For example, it may be easy to predict that if you harm someone, then it will make them and those around them sad or angry. However, when considering more tricky situations such as, for example, an abortion, it is impossible to tell for certain how the child's life and its mother's will turn out either way. So some point out that although Jesus was known to break the traditions and extra laws of the Pharisees had set in place, as shown in some of the Bible references that we we quoted, he never broke one of the 10 Commandments or any part of the Levitical law found in the Bible. However, some would argue that he did in fact break the 10 Commandments since he worked on the Sabbath day. Now, one other criticism of situational ethics is that it is quite vague. It says that the most moral thing to do is the thing that is the most loving. But then when it outlines what the most loving thing to do is, it says that the most loving thing to do is the thing that is the most just, from where it goes round in circles, round and round and round. So situational ethics is prepared to accept any action at all as morally right, and some people believe that certain actions can never be justified. So there's an introduction to what situational ethics is. Now in the next video I'm going to look at some examples of situational ethics and see really how we can respond to them. So I want to thank you for joining me in this video, and see you next time. Bye bye.